Welcome back. This is King Rex coming at you with another video in the Bond ranking series. And this one, I'm going to rank the Bond girls. I'm only ranking what I consider the main Bond girls. So to make this list, they had to be a main Bond girl and be an ally to James Bond. These are generally the girl he would end up with at the end of the movie. Um, a few other caveats here. I'm only ranking them on how good I felt they were in their individual movies, and I'm not ranking them on their overall significance to the series. I'm also not giving bonus points if I like the actress or deducting points if I dislike the actress outside of the Bond universe. They're not getting any bonus points for being in the better films, and they're not losing any points for being in the weaker films. It's based just on how enjoyable each Bond girl was. First, I want to get some honorable mentions out of the way. These are what I consider the best secondary Bond girls. They doesn't consider any femme fatales because those would go more to the henchman rankings. These are ones that pretty much were just secondary to the main Bond girl within their film, but I felt that they were really good. Most of these I felt were better than the main girl in their film. Um, so I'll start my honorable mentions out here with Jill Masterson out of Goldfinger. This is the Bond girl that, whenever you think of Goldfinger, you usually think of the scene of her on the bed covered in paint. This is kind of makes her one of the more iconic Bond girls because it's a very iconic scene from that movie. I felt that she was a really good Bond girl. She doesn't have a big role because at that time it seemed like they wanted to make there be at least three Bond girls in every movie because you had Jill Masterson, Tilly Masterson, and Pussy Galore and Goldfinger. Then in Thunderball there was Fiona Volpe and Domino. Then there was a third one that James Bond worked with. I can't think of her name. I think she was like a CIA agent. Then you had Kissy and Aki and You Only Live Twice, along with Helga Brandt. So you had like three Bond girls in every movie. And there were at least there's several you could consider in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. But they kind of had that unwritten rule at the time, which kind of led to some of those not getting enough screen time. And Joe Masterson was one of those girls. The next one I have is Plenty O'Toole out of Diamonds Are Forever. Another one I felt had a lot of potential, but she just kind of had a very small role within that film. Magda from Octopussy, she's kind of set up as the main Bond girl or as a femme fatale earlier in the film. And she does have scenes throughout the film, but she's secondary to Octopussy herself. She could have been made the main Bond girl in this film, but they made Octopussy the main girl in this one. Um, Lupe Lamora, this is probably the closest any Bond girl came to being a main Bond girl without actually being the main Bond girl. I think if James Bond would have chose her at the end of the film rather than Pam Bouvier, she would have been the main girl, but because he chose Pam Bouvier, she falls to the secondary Bond girl. The last is Paloma out of No Time to Die. I think this was a mistake that she should have been the main Bond girl. I never really understood why they didn't have her as the main girl in that film because she was quite enjoyable and fun. In fact, she's the only person in that film, in my opinion, that seems to be enjoying her time as a Bond girl. I'm going to get to my rankings. This one is not controversial, although there will be some controversial ones coming up. I have Stacey Sutton, played by Tanya Roberts. For whatever reason, they decided to have her like through the entire second half of the movie constantly scream and panic. I mean, almost everyone can remember the scene where she's in the elevator and James Bond's trying to find a way to get out of the elevator and she's constantly yelling at him like, James, James, help me. It's like he's trying to find a way to save both of your lives and you're just screaming and yelling. So she really does take away from the film because she's so annoying. She's also like probably the least intelligent Bond girl of all of them. She's supposed to be a college educated geologist, and she's realistically you wouldn't I wouldn't trust her to get my order right at a local diner as a waitress. She's not very intelligent. She lets herself get caught by a blimp, which is a very loud thing. I mean, even when they're way up in the air, they make quite a bit of noise. It'd almost be like getting caught by a Harley Davidson while you're walking down the sidewalk and not knowing the Harley Davidson's coming up behind you. So she just I'm not saying there's anything with the actress's fault here, but she just was really just a really bad Bond girl. She actually hurts the film. That's why she ranks last. Next one is Jinx from Die Another Day. I know about 15 to 20 years ago, a lot of people actually liked this Bond girl. I think the feelings have changed. I think people liked her a lot because it was Halle Berry and they liked the actress. And now that it's 20 years down the road, actually more than 20 years since the film was out, I think that extreme love for the actress has kind of faded a little bit. So she gets more appropriately ranked towards the bottom of most rankings. I remember most people having the feeling that she was at least a mid-tier Bond girl at the time. I'm like, really? Her issue with her, she has the absolute worst dialogue of any character in any James Bond movie. It's even worse than Sheriff Pepper was in The Man with the Golden Gun. It's realistically, she seems more like a spoof of a Bond girl that you'd expect out of an Austin Powers movie rather than an actual Bond girl. She's once again, she hurts the movie she's in. Although the writing was really bad, she's not the only bad element in Die Another Day, but she is one of the bad elements in that movie that really hurt it. So she ends up 23rd on my list. The next one is Madeline Swan. This is one that I just don't under. I mean, the reason why I think people like her is because she was the main Bond girl in two movies, so I think it's more for significance. Plus, James Bond does marry her on No Time to Die, which I really never got the relationship because it's obvious that neither character likes the other one. So why they would ever get married is kind of beyond me. I don't know why they brought her back. She was not likable at all. She was pretty terrible in Spectre. So why you bring back one of the worst Bond girls ever? She's a little bit better in No Time to Die, but she's still pretty bad in my opinion. Um, Also, she's part of the bad writing of James Bond believing that she set him up. I guess it would make sense that maybe she would set him up. She was a former, she's the daughter of a former Major Spectre member. But yeah, it's just a really bad Bond girl. This is the last one that I really just truly dislike of them. The other ones above this, it's just there's better ones than them. But yeah, like to me, bringing her back would be like having a voluntary root canal. Why would you ever do that? So it makes no sense to me that she's the only Bond girl that's the main Bond girl in two movies. The only reason to bring her back in No Time to Die would have been made her to get killed by Safin. That's why you're drawing James Bond back in and have him go around killing the members of Spectre individually rather than the one fell swoop that they did where he killed almost everybody at once. Number 21 is Holly Goodhead. I just say she's not good nor bad. She's just kind of benign. She doesn't seem like she enjoys the role. She's just going through the motions and kind of expressionless through most of the film. This is about as much expression as you get out of her. She's also supposed to be this intelligent Bond girl, but she puts James Bond unattended into the centrifuge thing that they use to test G forces on people. So it doesn't really make much sense that she would do something like you wouldn't do that because you would want to be there in case something bad happened. So it doesn't make much sense that she would walk away at that point. So to me, she's just kind of a very bland and uninteresting. So that's why she falls down to 21st. The next on the list is this is probably what people will disagree with a lot. Is Pussy Galore. I know she usually ranks towards the top, but I just never really cared for the character. Most of the characters in Goldfinger I really like, and she's one that I don't. So maybe it's just the fact that she's surrounded by such a great cast. It's one of Connery's best performances. Art Goldfinger is the best Bond villain. Oddjob's one of the best Bond henchmen. I really liked Jill Masterson. I think she would have been a better main Bond girl. They could have killed her later in the film. And I had a scene where James Bond ends up with the girl at the end, which they really don't have the main end up on a boat out in the ocean or a lake or something that they normally have with James Bond. I don't know, she just kind of rubs me the wrong way or something. I just don't care for the character, and that's why she falls here. So I don't blame people that like her. I just don't like the character. I also think the fact is that you have first Jill Masterson, who's the main girl for the first part of the movie. Then you have Tilly Masterson kind of in the middle. Then it switches to Pussy Galore being the main Bond girl for the end. It also doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to why she switches sides from Goldfinger. There's no reason for her to, but she goes from being on Goldfinger's side and his personal pilot to just stabbing him in the back and working with James Bond for really no reason. Melina Havlack is another one. I think it's just kind of maybe a little bland. She also does some things that aren't all that intelligent, like when she's going after the bad guy. She doesn't really have good plans or anything. She just kind of runs into the fray and really puts herself at risk. I can understand that she has. It's totally understandable her whole revenge plot. So it's probably one of the better written revenge plots in the series that a Bond girl gets. Um, just she kind of disappears at points in the movie. I think she's kind of a bland character. Maybe just because Fraser's Eyes Only is a much more low key movie, and it also suffers from that with a lot of different characters, like the main villains bland, the henchmen are bland, the Bond girl's kind of bland. I don't think there's even a secondary Bond girl in the movie that I can even think of. I think Roger Moore gives a really good performance, but he kind of carries that movie all by himself, in my opinion. This is another controversial one, Honey Rider, because she's probably the most iconic Bond girl. Because she did the first scene where she comes out. You meet her when she comes out of the ocean, or I think it's the Caribbean Sea in this case. I'm wearing the white bikini we see here. It's actually and the Spy Who Shagged Me from Austin Powers. They have both Felicity Shagwell, played by Heather Graham, and Austin Powers wearing white bikinis that look like this, which is kind of a funny scene. They show, you know, Heather Graham coming out first. Sonny Rider is very iconic, but she really doesn't do anything. She doesn't add anything to the movie other than just being good looking. She's kind of just along for the ride, and she only shows up, I think, in the last half, maybe even the last third of the movie. An interesting fact: she does play Vesper Lind in the 1967 version of Casino Royale, which is one of the most iconic Bond characters because of the Daniel Craig era. But to me, she just kind of is along for the ride. She really doesn't add much to the film other than her physical appearance. This one, I actually decided to go with two different girls to be the Bond girl at 17. Kissy Suzuki, who's pictured on the right, is most people's choice for main Bond girl, which she is in the second half of the movie. But Kissy's pictured on the left. Aki's pictured on the right. Aki is the main Bond girl through the first half of the movie until she gets accidentally killed by someone who's trying to kill James Bond. I think it would have just been better if they'd have made it one character instead of dividing it into two and left that part of the film out where she gets killed. I think it kind of messes with the movie a little bit. I think it would have flowed better. Plus, Kissy is really like kind of doesn't want much to do with James Bond, and then by the end of the movie, of course, she falls in love with him. Where it made sense with Aki, it kind of didn't with Kissy. So I kind of just combined these two together because one's the first half of the movie, the other's the second half of the movie. I think Aki actually made a better Bond girl than Kissy, and she did the entire first half of the movie, whereas Kissy kind of just finishes up at the end. This is another super controversial one just because of how significant she is, because she's the one girl James Bond married, and if you look at the first 20 movies, it's the only one that he really falls in love with. The issue I have is that, and I think a lot of people like it because Diana Rigg is such a big actress. She was in the TV show version of the Avengers back in the 60s, which I'm pretty sure has nothing to do with the MCU, but I'm not 100% positive because I never saw it. And I know she's in Game of Thrones, which is another thing that was a big phenomenon, which I think kind of lifted her status a bit because she was a Bond girl too. So I think she gets to lift from being in other things outside of Bond, and that she's very significant because she's his wife. But she only appears in one Bond movie, and they really don't talk about him being married before, except in two other films after that, maybe three. I don't think they even discuss it in Diamonds Are Forever. And they have the scene at the beginning of For Your Eyes Only, and it is mentioned by and the Spy Who Loved Me, and it is a good scene because Roger Moore shows that he just his reaction to her being that he was married once and his wife is deceased was great. To me, a few things here is number one. I think she's also helped because she's in plays opposite a guy who couldn't act at all, so it makes her acting look way better than what it was. I always want to like Diana Rigg in this, but every time I watch it, she just kind of, because I'm expecting this great performance. I think she's better than I'm. She has to be better than I remembered, and she never is. I don't buy the love story at all. You can tell at the first third or so of the movie, she doesn't even want to be bothered to be around James Bond. But in that movie, she actually within the movie, she's pretty much with him after a short montage of scenes that would take up an afternoon. She goes from not wanting anything to do with him pretty much to being hopelessly in love with him. So I don't buy it. Plus, the whole movie's just so I don't buy the love story. Even at the end, there's times where she just seems kind of a bit too much aloof. It's only the scene from here, this scene here, where she comes up to him at the skate rink by some crazy coincidence to the scene where they're in the barn together. That's the only scenes I really enjoy of her in the movie. I think she's just. I'd actually put her as the most overrated Bond girl ever because she's usually first or second, and I just don't think she does that great a performance. I just don't. Another one that I just don't really get, other than if it's for her significance, why she ranks so highly. Tiffany Case by Jill St. John. This one's probably controversial just because I'm probably one of the very few, if not the only person, to put Tiffany Case ahead of Tracy, but she's enjoyable in the movie. I know she does some sort of dumb things. Like one of the things people point out is when James Bond switches the cassette tape in the machine because you have to have this cassette tape to run it, and she switches it back, but he puts it like in the back of her bikini. So I could see her switching it around, like thinking that she's helping him out. So that's not really a dumb thing. That's her kind of doing something that she's taking initiative and being smart. Then when she shoots the machine gun, she does kind of have the goofy scene where she can't handle the kickback from it, which I don't think that kills the character. The only part of her I like the least is when she's at the gas station, but I think she's actually a fun and enjoyable Bond girl. I think she's kind of underrated. She's not as bad as people make her out to be. I think the movie's kind of underrated too. I think people are mad because they wanted a revenge movie after the death of Tracy, and that didn't happen. If you're viewing them in order, it would make sense as far as what a more congruent story. I'd actually watch Diamonds Are Forever before I'd watch On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And then I'd watch For Your Eyes Only right after On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Watch the first 20 movies all right in order, and that would make the timeline would probably fit a little bit better that way. But yeah, I think she's actually enjoyable and fun. I just like the other ones ahead of her better. The next one is Severine, who I think was pretty good. I might even have her lower than she should be. She's kind of here by default because there's not really a main Bond girl in Skyfall, but she is the closest we get. She does die in the movie. She's murdered by the main bad guy, Silva, kind of as a way to prove a point to James Bond to show how maniacal he is and how much of a sadist he is. I think it's actually, I mean, you don't like to see her die that way, but you can kind of understand. A lot of thing that makes me mad about this is she was a victim of human trafficking, and people get mad because James Bond has sex with her. But if a man had an opinion of a woman that was raped or sexually abused, that they would be off, that they would be dirty or sullied in some manner, that they would not want to touch such a woman, that, like, that's not any good anymore. That's been ruined. That would be seen as being misogynistic. But then, because he has sex with a woman that was sexually abused, he's taken advantage of her when she clearly is not telling him no in any way. So that part of the film, I think, is people being nitpicky with it. They just, like I said, the people in the top 20 I do consider good Bond girls, and just other people are ahead of them. Number 13 is Wei Lin. This is another one people will probably get on my case about. She's kind of done through the first two thirds to three fourths of the movie as being James Bond's equal, kind of like Barbara Bach was in The Spy Who Loved Me. So she's really good in that part. But then when we start getting towards the end of the movie, I don't buy the love story because she really was. You could tell that she did not want to have any type of relationship with him. So I think that kind of hurts the character a lot. She's also as a damsel in distress, which I know they do that a little bit with Barbara Bach, but with Barbara Bach, I think she was caught by she was it made sense because she was caught by, I'm pretty sure, Jaws to get in that position, whereas Wei Lin's just caught by anybody, I think. So I think realistically, I think they undermine her character a whole lot at the end of the movie. I think a lot of people also like it because of Michelle Yeoh as an actress. I think it buoys her, her in the rankings a bit more than she should be. Like I said, good Bond girl, not quite top 10 for me though. Mary Goodnight, people kind of go after her because she kind of makes a few mistakes within the movie, like she bumps the machine on with her butt in the movie. But I don't think she's that bad. She's not meant to be a 100% most competent agent out there. They don't like change her in some manner. She's kind of that way through the whole movie. She's very enjoyable. You can tell Britt Eklund was having a great time doing the role. So to me, it's more or less I find her much more enjoyable than a lot of the other Bond girls on the list. And that's what moves her up this far for me. This is as high as I can put her, though. I think she's another one that's kind of underrated. And people kind of go nitpicky. I know a lot of people don't like the movie The Man with the Golden Gun, but to me, you got a great villain, a great henchman, and a great performance by Roger Moore. The other things in that movie I don't care for so much are the slide whistle effect, which I wish you could take out when watching it. And Sheriff Pepper's a bit much in this movie. The movie would have been better without him. But if you're ready for him, you kind of brace yourself. He's not that bad. You just kind of have to grin and bear it a little bit with that. But he doesn't ruin the movie. Number 11's Octopussy. Maud Adams. This is one of the first Bond movies I actually watched as a kid, and I always liked it. I think she does a good job. I actually like Magda better than Octopussy, but I think she does a good job. She's very competent, kind of on par with. I don't think with the Roger Moore Bond girls, people kind of go after him, but there's a lot of Bond girls that were kind of on par with James Bond in his era of films. Like you have Anya from The Spy Who Loved Me. You have Octopussy from Octopussy. Even um, from For Your Eyes Only with Havlik is kind of on par with him. So they kind of act like you had all these ditzy Bond girls, but really, Mary Goodnight was a little bit, but she was a lot of fun. And her making a mistake by bending over and bumping something with her butt is not as bad as people make it out to be. So I think Octopus is a good Bond girl. She just misses the top 10 because there's just 10 that I think are so good that you can't really put them lower. Number 10 is Tatiana Romanova and From Russia with Love, one of the best Bond films. The only thing that hurts her is that there's large portions of the movie where she's kind of absent from it, and there are large portions of the movie where she's kind of just along for the ride. And things are, although she does kill Rosa Klebb at the end of the movie, um, much of the movie, like on the whole train ride part, she's kind of just along for the ride with James Bond. She really doesn't add much other than just being there, or she's almost like an obstacle because he kind of has to make sure that she's okay as he's kind of fighting off Red Grant. So, but still a great Bond girl. I just think that she's a little too absent from the movie at times, and she's kind of along for the ride at times too. But she does do some important things as well. Vesper Lynn, this is one that most people put first or second, which and I think it's more for significance than anything else. She's a good Bond girl. Um, I think people overestimate the amount of chemistry she had with Daniel Craig because I know she did have chemistry with them. And because her Bond girls really didn't have any chemistry with like Madeline Swan, I think it overemphasized that chemistry a little bit more. And plus, Die Another Day, there was no chemistry really there with Jinx between Bond either. So she's kind of in an era where we don't have as much chemistry. And Severine really didn't get the full Bond girl experience. So there's levels of chemistry. So I think it's just she's the best of this pretty long 6 film era. The only one that could really even compare to her would be Paloma, who's really just not in the film enough. I think she's a good Bond girl, but I do think there are others that are better. I think she's rated as high as she is, simply because she's so significant because she looms over the entire Daniel Craig era. And the one thing that upsets me is that Inspector, when Bond finds the tape of her interview or interrogation, they never show it. They never watch that. It's like You keep going back to Vesper Lynn. When you finally have something I want you to go back to, you don't show it to us. That should have been in the movie. Pam Bouvier out of License to Kill. One of the highlights of License to Kill, the movie had a lot of great acting. Um, she's very competent and capable. I'd say one of the most competent Bond girls ever as a CIA agent. I don't think she does anything that's really all that dumb in the movie. Um, so I'd put her as one of the top Bond girls out there. I don't have much more to say. She's just a really good, solid Bond girl that belongs in the top 10. Camille Montez, the only Bond girl that doesn't sleep with James Bond, although it wouldn't fit with the film. She's on one of the another one of these that are on a revenge plot. Does it much better than they did with For Your Eyes Only. Um, she fights her bad guy who's tougher than the bad guy James Bond fights because, let's be honest, Dominic Green seems like a computer nerd. So I think she does a great job in this movie, makes it far more enjoyable. The only negative to her is that she was kind of saddled with a poorly written movie, but she does the best with it. Maybe she could be higher in a better movie. But that's not judging her based on the movie. That's just that there's only so much she was given to work with. Christmas Jones, this is one that a lot of people don't like. I always liked Denise Richards in this. Yeah, she's really, they say she's too beautiful to be a nuclear physicist, which is probably true, but that'd be true of anybody they would put in that role. I mean, I don't even know if there's anyone at that time you could put in that role. Maybe you'd have taken Amy Acker, but she was not really acting at that time. Someone that's really beautiful that can seem very competent and intelligent. But once again, this movie came out in '99. I don't think Amy Acker debuted in acting until Angel, like 2000 or 2001. But you're taking someone who looks like a supermodel, making her a nuclear physicist. She seems more competent than some of the other ones that people don't complain about, like Stacey Sutton. So I think she's good. I know it's controversial to have her this high, but yeah, there are some issues with that. But I think she's a great girl. People also crack her having a funny name, but that's a Bond girl thing. They have names that sound like they're made for strippers and porn stars, and hers is not as bad as a lot of them. Kara Malovi from The Living Daylights, I think she's highly underrated. Of all the Bond girls in all the movies, if you ask me which one it seemed like James Bond would be the most likely to marry and settle down with, it would have been Kara Malovi. Far more believable love story than with Tracy Bond, far more believable than with Madeline Swan, even more believable than with Vesper Lynn. I think she does a great job. Part of it for me is she feels like a real person. She seems like someone you might actually meet in real life. Most of these Bond girls don't feel like real people. She really does. So she really nailed it with that. That's one of the things why I think she's such a great Bond girl. I think she's usually ranked pretty low, but she's a real person. A lot of them are really not. Like the argument against Denise Richards, she doesn't feel like a real person. But then Kara Malovi, played by Marion Dabo, never gets the benefit for seeming like a real person. Number four, Solitaire. Jane Seymour for Live and Let Die. I think the whole idea of the character that can read the future through tarot cards is great. I know she seems a bit like a damsel in distress, but it really goes well with the character. This isn't a character that's supposed to be like a MI6 agent or a CIA agent or something like that. She's just a normal person that she had this ability, and James Bond kind of rescues her from the life of working for a criminal. So I think she's kind of a little underrated. Always one of my favorite Bond girls to watch. I enjoy watching Jane Seymour in this movie. That's probably why she ranks as high as she does. Natalia Simonova out of Goldeneye, another great one. The only issue with her is when she couldn't figure out the riddle that what's something you sit on, and it's the answer is a chair. That's the only issue I have with Natalia, but great Bond girl. Kind of almost on a par of James Bond, but not quite. Part of the reason why Goldeneye is such a good movie is because she's so good in it. Next Bond girl is Domino from Thunderball. The thing with Thunderball, in my opinion, had the two best Bond girls of the Sean Connery era, which to me is the first seven films. That's Domino and the Femme Fatale of Fiona Volpe. I think she does a great acting performance in this movie. Very believable, very integral to the story. She kind of is held captive in a way. by the main bad guy, but she's kind of like his girlfriend too. But I think it's a situation if it's what she has to do, and then she learns he killed her brother. So it makes sense that she does kind of change sides and no longer is allied with Largo at that point. She kills Largo in the end of the movie, so it's kind of a great revenge plot that really pays off at the end. Um, I don't think any other revenge plot except Claire Montes pays off as much at the end because I don't think they actually kill the bad guys. Generally speaking, they just help get to him. So it's a movie that really pays off in the end, and she does it to perfection. Once again, one of my favorite Bond girls from the Connery era. Last on the list is Anya Amasova, played by Barbara Bach in The Spy Who Loved Me. Um, Completely James Bond's equal. She's actually the Russian equivalent of James Bond. I do buy the story at the end where, because she does say she's going to kill James Bond when the story ends, but he does end up saving her in the end, which changes her mind, and she doesn't try to kill him at that point, which makes all the sense in the world. Um, like I said, just a great performance, great Bond girl, one of the most enjoyable ones to watch because she's on par with James Bond. I think that really makes her a great Bond girl because she can give as good as she gets in the movie. A lot of times they're secondary to her, but she's not. So that's why I put her number one. I'd like to thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and have a great day.